Hi everyone, welcome to week 5 in Principles of Macroeconomics. For this week, you're going to be reading chapters 17, 19, and 20. Here are some of the websites I think you'll find very helpful for this week. What we're looking at this week is economic development and the characteristics of a developing country. Growth is a very important concern for developed industrialized countries like the United States. However, it's not life or death for many developing countries, and we refer to them as less developed countries. We're only looking at the current living standards. So economic development's focused on living standards of these various countries and the challenges of these various countries that we're facing. Now, characteristics of a developing country is any GNI, gross national income, of less than $1,000 per individual. There are 35 countries that were categorized as this low in 2011, and about 56 countries were classified as lower to middle income, between the range of 1,000 to 4,000. So you notice that these low income levels are all over the world, and if you look for this dark shade of brown, that's where you see the low income levels. Now, characteristics of a developing country. Most of their industries are focused on agriculture. They devote a large share of resource to agriculture. Some of their agriculture is large scale, relatively modern. They export a lot of agriculture, but the problem is that is not going to lead to large economic growth. Simple labor-intensive technology is used to produce food for individuals, families, rather than crops to be sold for cash. You'll notice that the climate in these poor countries are more tropical. Conversely, industrialized countries are in more temperature climates. You'll notice that developing economists have suggested that warmer climates produce lower human effort, more diseases, unfavorable agriculture conditions. You'll notice that there's a lot of tropical countries that are largely jungle or desert. You notice that the environments that these countries are in are very challenging for them to do anything other than agriculture-based. Now, another characteristic is poverty and inequality. When we look at the distribution of income in developing countries, we show greater inequality. And this typical greater inequality shows extreme wealth and poverty, with a small wealth elite. Now, a large mass of people who are poor in both urban and rural areas, and there's very small middle class as well. When you see this distribution of income, it makes it very difficult to save and invest, because most of the wealthy will control most of that. When we look at poverty and inequality, you'll notice that it ranges. And they're ranging from, different levels, and it changes over time. So that's the key thing to note. When we look at this graph right here, you notice the rest of the world that are living on less than $1.25 per day, and you notice that it's declined a little bit. And the poverty rates have declined over the years as well. So some of the demographics of the developing countries is that you're going to have the growth rate's going to be larger, the age distribution of population, you're not going to have as many people that are older because of the challenges that we're facing. You'll notice that there's going to be a lot of differences between developing and developed countries. There's going to be birth rates that are going to be much lower because of the challenges with the medical system, death rates that are much higher. And we look at population, you'll notice that population growth is very large in these economies because they're lacking the medical contraceptives to maybe control their economic environments. Population growth is expected to come almost exclusively from developing countries. When you look at the U.S., you notice we have a very flat growth in population. Now, human capital is investment in knowledge. And we look at this, most low-income countries invest very little in human capital or health, education, and skills of their citizens. One reason why low-income countries invest little in human capital is that they have little to invest at all. And we look at the vicious cycle of poverty, you'll notice that you'll be stuck in this cycle of poverty because people's investment in education, when there is no education or infrastructure ready, they'll be stuck in this poverty cycle. Now, economic development. The problem for development is that most of the projected growth will still occur in the developing countries. Today, medical advances, inoculations, many life-threatening techniques, they've spread throughout the world, but they've reduced death rates, even in developing countries. Now, when you look at economists, they consider a large number of dependent children, but they're a drag on economic development. Population is a very challenging thing to deal with for these economies. Now, there's different theories and strategies to look at. When we look at Adam Smith, you look at the Wealth of Nations, it set forth the classic principles of economic development, which rests on the laissez-faire governmental policies toward private industry and commerce. So he said, let the government not be involved in markets and let markets respond on their own. And when you look at some of Smith's theories, they're rooted in classical tradition, where David Ricardo, his was based on productivity levels. And productivity levels are very important. And then Thomas Malthus was looking at population growth. And population growth was focused on how to give subsistence level to the people that we have in our economy. But there's a lot of challenges when we look at this. Now, big push or leading sectors. The big push strategy calls for a major thrust on all fronts in the economy by government or by private enterprise. This strategy is based on the classical notion that growth in the output of an industry is limited by the extent of the market. So when you look at this, we have two different things we focus on: import substitution or export promotion. So import substitution is basically self-sufficiency. So a productive development strategy is where import substitution usually requires a lot of trade barriers to protect fledgling domestic industries. So you don't want these industries to leave the country, so you develop strategies that help protect the industries within the country. Then you have what's called export promotion, an export-oriented style where the government's main focus is to provide support for our economy to be able to trade more. And we're able to trade more, this will create a lot of opportunities for our economy. And export promotion is very important. And we want to find ways for export promotion to create economic growth. When you look at the role of government, you'll notice there's choices and strategies and implementation that they focus on. But when the government gets involved in many decisions, it creates a lot of challenges. We would like the government to support the export industries, but it also creates a lot of challenges when you're looking at the export industry. We also want to look at determining the appropriate role of government in aiding economic development. That's challenging as well. How much support should the government provide in these industries? Now, can democratic government succeed? That's a big challenge. The debate over democracy and growth has concerned industrial and development countries alike for many years. Some of the more successful cases have occurred under political systems that are more dictatorial. So what it means is they're making specific decisions for the economy. Now, when we look at laissez-faire, you're looking at an economy that's moving by itself. And we're looking at, there's no real clear-cut answer. And when we look at this, the key is not the political apparatus or the size of the public sector, but it's what the government does, how the government manages those resources. Military spending is one where the government provides a lot of support. In many developing countries, a large share of public expenditures is devoted to military. Several African countries have been fighting guerrilla wars for many years. Military spending is very helpful for economic growth. Military spending can help create growth for an economy through the spending in these different sectors. Now, when you look at Chapter 18 is going to focus on the balance of payments. And we're going to be focusing on current account. The current account is a part of the balance of payments that's looking at the transactions of the goods and services, which is focused on merchandise, services, investment, income, and other things. And we look at also the balance of trade, which is looking at exports and imports. The deficit is the balance of trade in particular has been a greater concern to policymakers, because you'll notice that the U.S. has a very large growing deficit. When we look at the capital account is part of the balance of payments. It summarizes purchases and sales of financial assets. It's looking at bonds, debts, bank deposits, stocks, and plants. Capital account is very important as we focus on foreign assets in the U.S. and abroad. Let me show you this. When we look at currency, the foreign exchange markets focus on the role of currency. The price of a nation's currency is measured in terms of the number of units of the other currency it can buy. One problem of a floating rate system is the difficulty of measuring changes in the price of one currency when others are moving around at the same time. Another factor in measuring exchange rates is to look at the price level, look at the inflation rate, look at the growth rate. Exchange rates will fluctuate based off of the different policies in our economy. So the key policies we want to focus on are growth rates, inflation rate, economic and political stability. Many of these rates will cause the currency to appreciate or the currency to depreciate. But these currency fluctuations are very important to focus on. And it creates a lot of opportunities as well in our economy. So see, these are some of the concepts that we're focusing on this week. If you need additional resources or any more assistance, please let me know, but I look forward to your efforts.